They never told you that the most sacred energy lives right at the base of your spine. They taught you anatomy, but not alchemy. They spoke of biology, but not divinity. Sexual energy, they called it desire. They called it instinct. They never called it power. They never called it light. But the ancients knew. They mapped it, named it, respected it, because they understood that sexual energy is life force, not just for procreation, but for creation, for insight, for awakening. And yet, most of us were taught to suppress it, to be ashamed of it, to avoid it, or misuse it. We were given rules, not wisdom, control, not connection, and in that silence, a sacred knowledge was buried. But it's still there, in your body, in your breath, waiting. You see, sexual energy isn't dirty, it's divine. It's not chaotic, it's creative. It's not dangerous, it's dormant. Until you remember, and when you do, everything changes. Your energy rises, your perception sharpens, your heart opens, because sexual energy is not separate from spirit. It is spirit, moving through the body. It's the spark that brings life into form, the pulse that animates desire, not just for pleasure, but for purpose. And this was the secret, the one hidden behind doctrine, behind shame, behind centuries of fear. Because when a human reclaims their sexual energy, they reclaim themselves, not as an object, but as a source, not as a role, but as a flame. And in that flame, there is remembrance that you were never broken, never sinful, only sacred and powerful beyond measure. But here's what they didn't say, that this energy could be directed, not just released, that it could be refined, not denied, that it could lift you instead of depleting you. This is the forgotten teaching, that your body is not a barrier to the divine. It's a vessel, a temple, a channel, and sexual energy is its fire, tamed not by shame, but by presence, by reverence, by awakening. You don't need to fear it, you need to meet it, with clarity, with awareness, with truth. Because once you do, everything inside you begins to shift. And this is just the beginning. Most people think of sexual energy as something wild, something to control, to limit, to resist, because that's what they were taught, that it's primal, lower, unspiritual. But what if that energy is actually your key to higher consciousness? In ancient traditions, sexual energy wasn't separate from enlightenment, it was central to it. They knew that the same energy that creates life also creates clarity, peace, even bliss. They called it prana, chi, kundalini, and it wasn't shameful. It was sacred. It wasn't something to hide. It was something to honor, to cultivate, to awaken. But when that knowledge was lost, sexuality became distorted, turned into taboo, sold as fantasy, feared as sin. So we disconnected. We separated love from sex, body from soul, sacredness from pleasure, and we forgot that the energy rising from the root could also open the crown. That pleasure could also be prayer. That attraction could also be alignment. And that's the secret most never hear, that your sexual energy isn't just meant to be spent, it's meant to be harnessed, guided, honored, You can channel it into movement, into art, into breath, into stillness. And when you do, you begin to glow differently. People feel you before you speak, not because you're seductive, but because you're sovereign. You're not chasing, you're radiating, because you're connected to your source, your center. This kind of energy doesn't crave validation, it doesn't manipulate, it magnetizes, it heals, it elevates, and it's not reserved for the few. It's available to anyone who's willing to unlearn, to pause, to feel, to remember. You see, true sexual mastery is not about performance, it's about presence. It's not about how much you feel, it's about how deeply, not how loud your desire is, but how silent your awareness becomes when you listen to it. And that listening, that sacred attention, is what opens the door to wisdom, to reverence, to transformation. You don't shut down the fire, you learn to hold it with awareness, with breath, with love. This is the path of true mastery, and it begins by simply saying yes to your own aliveness. So how do you begin? Where do you start? When the maps you were given led you away from yourself, first, you slow down, you breathe, you turn inward, not to analyze, but to feel, to notice where the energy moves, where it gets stuck, where it wants to rise. This awareness is the beginning of transformation. You don't need rituals, you don't need fancy practices, you need presence, because sexual energy doesn't need to be activated. It's already alive. It just needs to be met with honesty, with curiosity, without shame, without guilt. And this is where healing begins, not in controlling the energy, but in learning to trust it, to let it speak, to listen without judgment, to feel without labeling. And in that space, something opens, a doorway, a remembrance that your body is not separate from the divine. It is the divine in motion. And when you stop trying to fix it, you start to feel it. You begin to sense that there's intelligence in your desire, that longing is not a weakness, it's a signal, a message from your soul, asking you to return, to come home, to yourself, to your essence. Because the truth is, sexual energy isn't just about intimacy, it's about intimacy with life, with the now, with breath, with awareness. And when you connect, not to someone else, but to yourself, you create a different kind of magnetism, one rooted in clarity, in authenticity, in sovereignty. You stop needing and start radiating. You stop chasing and start becoming. And maybe you felt this before, that quiet ache, that knowing, that pull towards something deeper. If you're still here, still listening, maybe this message was for you. Maybe your soul guided you here. And if so, don't ignore the pull. Let it speak, let it rise, let it remind you that you're not here to be numb, you're here to be fully alive. And if something in this stirred something in you, let it echo. Drop a comment, not to impress, but to express, to reflect, to be part of the remembering. The more you connect with your sexual energy, the more you realize it was never about someone else. It was always about you, your vitality, your alignment, your presence, because this energy is not a currency to trade. It's a current to live by, a rhythm, a resonance. And when it's blocked, you feel it in your fatigue, in your disconnection, in your frustration. But when it flows, so does your life. Ideas become clearer, emotions become cleaner, desires become grounded, and that's when the transformation deepens. You begin to notice how the world taught you to split yourself, to put your body on one side and your soul on the other. But your power was always in the union, not an escape, but an embodiment. And now, you're learning to walk as a whole being, no longer hiding, no longer apologizing, but radiating, not to be seen, but because you can't help it. This is what happens. When sexual energy is integrated, you don't lose yourself in others. You find yourself within. And from that place, you love more fully, not to fill a void, but to share your overflow. This is sacred sexuality, not performance, but presence, not seduction, but surrender, not escape, but expansion. You begin to feel that every breath is foreplay, that every moment is intimacy, because you're no longer waiting for permission to feel. You're allowing, and that changes everything. It changes how you relate to your body, to your truth, to the world. You start moving differently, speaking more intentionally, breathing with reverence, because now you're not just living, you're embodying. Every moment becomes sacred, not because of what you do, but because of how fully you show up. You bring soul into sensation, stillness into desire, awareness into instinct, and that fusion is liberation. You begin to understand that sexual energy is not a part of life. It is life, fully awakened, fully remembered, fully honored. The deeper you go, the more you realize this energy is not separate from your soul's path. It is your soul's path, because sexual energy is the seed of everything you create, your art, your vision, your healing, your love. And when you deny it, you deny your own becoming. You stay small, split, disconnected. But when you reclaim it, you begin to bloom, not outwardly, but inwardly. Your spirit expands, your intuition sharpens, your clarity deepens, because you're no longer leaking energy. You're containing it, holding it, guiding it, not with force, but with reverence. And this changes how you walk through the world, how you speak, how you listen. You stop performing and start embodying. Your touch becomes intentional. Your gaze becomes healing. Your silence becomes medicine. You become magnetic, not for what you give, but for who you are. And people feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense it, that there is something in you, untamed, unbroken, unapologetically whole. And that kind of energy invites truth. It shakes what's false. It awakens what's forgotten. Because when you embody this power, you give others permission to remember theirs. You don't dominate, you don't demand, you simply are. And that is enough. That is freedom. But this journey isn't always easy. It asks for honesty. It asks for presence. It asks you to sit with discomfort, to meet the parts of you that were never loved, to feel without fleeing, to open without defense. And that takes courage, because reclaiming sexual energy is reclaiming innocence, not naivety, but purity, the kind that knows you were always sacred, even in your mess, even in your mistakes. You begin to see that this energy is not something to transcend, it's something to integrate, to welcome, to honor. And through that, you don't just awaken your body, you awaken your soul to the truth that you were never separate from your own power. This energy was never meant to be feared. It was meant to be remembered. Because when you reclaim it, you reclaim your light, your depth, your truth. You begin to see that the divine didn't place this energy in you to tempt you, but to transform you, to awaken you, to lead you back to yourself. This is sacred fire, not to burn you, but to build you, to forge you into something whole, something luminous. And maybe that's what you've been sensing all along, that the ache inside you wasn't shame, it was longing, the pull of your own power, asking you to come home, to listen, to rise, to stop apologizing for your fire, and start embodying it, not recklessly, but reverently, not to control, but to co-create. And when you do, you'll feel it, in your breath, in your bones, in your presence, a quiet certainty that you are no longer seeking, you are remembering, you are returning, not to a place, but to a truth. And in that return, there is peace, not the peace that avoids, but the peace that includes, that welcomes, that integrates. You see, sexual energy isn't separate from your awakening. It is the awakening. It's the moment you stop fragmenting yourself and start living as a whole. You walk differently, you speak with clarity, you touch with purpose, you no longer withhold your truth out of fear, you no longer chase love out of lack, you embody both, from fullness, from center, from the knowing that you are enough, not because you fixed yourself, but because you felt yourself, and in that feeling, you remembered the divine was never outside you, it lives here, in the pulse, in the breath, in the longing, in the light. And now, if this stirred something in you, if it cracked something open, don't let it close, let it breathe, let it root. Drop a comment below, so others know they're not alone in this remembering. And if this message felt like home, if something in your soul whispered yes, subscribe, not just to watch, but to walk this path together.